Right. So I just wanted to get into this a little bit because nobody's covering it. Didn't even trend on Twitter for some mysterious reason, despite the fact that people have been talking about it and ranting about it all day. Britain's worst ever child grooming sex scandal exposed. Hundreds of young white girls raped, beaten, sold for sex, and some even killed. And it hasn't even got a front page headline at The Guardian. It's not on the BBC website. It's fucking nowhere. And I just wanted to, in my own small way, at least get something else up there and just go through it. Just mark the occasion, because I mean I did an article a long time ago, one of my earlier ones on the blog, called "Just Another 300 White Girls Raped," and that was to do with Oxford. And here we are. I mean, all right, so it was going on for decades, and it was obviously covered up, because I don't believe for a second that this can go on for year after year after year. Nick Griffin, this is the one I believe that Nick Griffin tried to address, and the Daily Mirror, who's breaking the story, tried to have him arrested for it. And certainly there was arseholes in the chat who pop up and say, well, what are the English doing about it? We're fucking trying to do something about it, but we'll get arrested, you stupid cunt. So, if we can just scroll down a little bit. Special Sunday Mirror investigation. I mean, look at the picture. Let's just look at the picture they're using. The Daily, they might have broke a story, but they're not our friends. Does that look like 11-year-old girls? So anyway, for fuck's sake, up to 1,000 children could have suffered in Britain's worst known abuse scandal, where sex gangs targeted girls as young as 11. The rape hell of vulnerable girls in one town, Telford, went on for a shocking 40 years. Sunday Mirror can reveal as many as 1,000 children could have suffered at the merciless hands of perverts and torturers in Telford since the 1980s. Okay, so I've been through this before. They're not perverts, they're not pedophiles. The age of consent at 16, that's the white man's rules. That's the rules that the white man set down for the white man, where you don't go near a girl. It's an arbitrary line drawn. 16, then that's it. But when you invite millions of people from Pakistan and Bangladesh and Christ knows where else, they don't give a shit about your rules and your morality. They're not pedophiles, and they use these words like pervert and pedophile. They use them because in the minds of the normie white British, it conjures up images of a sort of sad weirdo in a rain muck hiding in a bush shelter, or somebody getting a sneaky photograph of a girl's dress or something like that. And this says a lot. I mean, the total outcasts. They're not pedophiles as we understand. They're selling it's bullshit. Girls as young as 11 have been lured from their families to be drugged, beaten and raped in an epidemic that, say victims, is still ongoing. 3 people were murdered and 2 others died in tragedies linked to the scandal. Here again, I mean, just look at that picture. Does that look like the picture of a fucking 12-year-old girl? It's a prostitute. They're not prostitutes, they're fucking children. Re-victimized, I don't want to watch that. Like another profile cases in Rochdale and Rotherham, authorities in Telford repeatedly fail to stamp out a network of abusers. Social workers knew of abuse in the 1990s, but police took a decade to launch a probe. Council staff view abuse and trafficked children as prostitutes instead of victims, according to previously unseen files. Authorities failed to keep details of abusers from Asian communities for fear of racism. And there we have it. I mean, isn't it a fucking... Why didn't these girls just pull out their white privilege card? Lefties? Why didn't they just pull out the magic white privilege card. Does this look like a society that's run on white privilege? Police failed to investigate one recent case 5 times until an MP intervened. One victim said cops tried to stop her finding out why her abusers had not been prosecuted because they feared she would talk to us. The scale of the abuse uncovered in Telford, population 170, is feared to be the most brutal and long-running of all. The Rotherham toll was put at 1,500. It was originally 1,400, but they've bumped it up by another 100. But that was in a community of 260,000. Telford's Tory MP Lucy Allen has demanded a public inquiry and said our findings were extremely serious and shocking. I mean, well, she said there must now be an independent inquiry into child sexual exploitation at Telford so that our community can have absolute confidence in the authorities. There must be now another inquiry. Another inquiry. I can tell you what's a matter for free. We've got a bunch of lefty fucking lunatics in the local councils, and we've got in the higher government and in the deep state even a concerted effort to wipe out the native white population. And in that context, thousands upon thousands of white girls being raped and butchered like this it's just part of the deal. And when we complain about it, we're arrested. All of the hate speech laws are specifically designed to lock us in so that we can't say anything about it. And I'll get on to I just want to get through this because we're on full lockdown. Brittany Pettibone, some cute little American cutie Christian alt-light, comes in, tries to come in to talk about these things with Tommy Robinson, and she's detained. They arrest her. This is the state that we're in, and it's just a full lockdown. Suppress it on Twitter. Don't mention it on the BBC. We're living in a fucking police state here. The survivors deserve another inquiry. Will be on the way, and it'll say lessons to be learned. Outrageous. We need to be taking this more seriously. And then another 5,000 rapes, suicides, forced abortions with coat hangers down the road. And then in another 20 or 30 years, oh dear, look, you're a minority now. And these people can actually just vote for the rape and vote in all their own guys in the local councils. The lefties will just be bumped out. They accused more than 70 abusers and claimed that violent rapes were still taking place. One 14-year-old groomed and abused after her phone number was stolen. The paedophile, they're not paedophiles. They're an out-group. They're a predatory out-group. And they're absolutely massacring we're being cooked. It's a sign of supremacy and domination. They're not paedophiles as the normal white British people understand it. Those are our rules for us. These people aren't us. I hated what was happening, and my abuser's mate made my skin crawl, but I was told that if I said a word to anyone, they'd come for my little sisters and tell my mum I was a prostitute. Night after night, I was forced to have sex with multiple men in disgusting takeaways and filthy houses. I must have been getting the morning after pill from a local clinic at least twice a week, but no one asked any questions. I fell pregnant twice and had 2 abortions. Hours after my second termination, I was taken by one of my abusers to be raped by more men. The worst moment came after my 16th birthday when I was drugged and gang raped by 5 men. Days later, the ringleader turned up at my house and told me he'd burn it down if I breathed a word of what had happened. Documents will be passed to the Home Office reveals authorities knew of the horrors a decade before investigating and shows how they tried to hamper our probe. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting when you've got all the Jewish Community Secretary Trust and Tell Mama and Hope Not Hate? Thanks, Hope Not Hate. Thanks, a fucking bunch. Great job. Document, we presented our findings to Professor Liz Kelly from the Child and Women Abuse Studies Unit. Oh, now the feminists as well. Where the fuck are the feminists? We're out on our own. The only people who address this are the ones going to jail for hate speech and being detained. On all sides, we're locked in. It's like, I said it to a friend the other day, it's like when they go hunting rabbits. If you've ever seen that, I see it all the time. They kind of fill in all of the holes in the warren. So they leave two open. They leave two holes open, and the one hole they leave open into the warren is where they send the ferrets and the terriers in, and the other one is where the only place left that the rabbits can bolt to get out. And the only place that's being left to us is some sort of violent insurrection, and that's madness because it'll just see you mowing down on the streets. Parents, a few of you are sex grooming whitewash. That's a fucking poor choice of words, isn't it? We are acting as if we didn't know about child sex abuse rings. We have an unfortunate capacity to choose to forget. Well, I don't forget. I've been at this for 10 fucking years, and I haven't forgot any of it. What do you mean? How do you forget what? Did you forget about Stephen Lawrence when he got knifed off them white lads in the bush shelter? When they made his mother a dame and she's in the House of Lords and he's got a statue about him? Did you forget about that? You forget because they're white. Because it's inconvenient to remember. It's inconvenient to make a big fuss about it. Just bury it. Just bury it and move on. Sheila Taylor of the NWG network, I have no idea what that is, worked on the Rotherham inquiry. She said the true scale of the Telford problem might never be known because many victims are unlikely to come forward. She said there is probably a whole cohort of young people that are not identified. We are good at identifying white girls, but are less able to identify young men, young people from. It's because they're not there. Traveling communities. Well, what's this? What? Or people with learning or other disabilities? What is this cultural Marxist bullshit? Even here, they're invoking the equalities dogma. We are good at identifying the white girls are still the oppressors. The white girls are still privileged because they haven't managed to identify any jippos or people in wheelchairs who got gang raped by Pakistanis. This is the lunacy where a police investigation called Operation Chalice identified more than 100 potential victims abused between 2000, so that's 2 years. That's like one a week. Cops also said there could be as many as 200 perpetrators, but just 9 were caged, and the case was then closed. Why was it closed? You see, when you kind of just stop and you have a look at it, whether it's they're complaining because no gypsies or cripples came forward to say that they'd been gang raped, and then you sift through it. You sift through right? So why was the investigation closed then? We don't know. Today, our investigation reveals the authorities were told of the abuse epidemic more than a decade before Chalice. Our probe, backed by documents obtained under the Freedom of Information from 2 paedophiles, began targeting girls from a local children's home in 1981. 1981. One of the abusers earned thousands a night for years, trafficking girls around the country for sex with hundreds of men, according to one victim. In another case, a 14-year-old was groomed by an 18-year-old Asian in 1985. I mean, it's just, look at the pictures they're using. They're using pictures of slappers out on the piss, when they've just said before that they were picking 11-year-olds up from children's homes. I just wanted to at least mark the occasion so that there's something extra on the internet about this, because it's buried. It's in the news today, and they're screaming blue murder at the government all over Twitter and on social media, and there's petitions on the go to have official inquiries and investigations, which they're already going to do. I mean, it sounds great, but nobody gives a shit. The government don't care. They know, and they don't care. If you're white, they don't care. You're an inconvenience. You're standing in the way of the great, grand New World Order, and you need to be brushed aside like dust, like a bit of filth. And if your girls are going to get raped, they don't care. You know, this is what people have to understand. It's not about, and you hear all of these abstract values, all this here, the political discussions being about all of these abstract values. Well, here's the real deal. I mean, at this point, I'm just a complete, full-out fascist. Because you see, what is white? What is white? All these stupid debates. We've got to get these people out of our country as fast as we can. And that's all there is to it. I mean, okay, what can we do about it? For the time being, people in these areas are going to have to keep their girls indoors. And you can say, oh, that's where we are now. You're just we have to try and get the message out. If you're a white family and you've got young girls and you're in an area with all these Pakistanis and these Muslims, you can't let them out anymore until we can get rid of the men, until we can find a way to segregate these invaders in another area, at least in another, to some sort of segregation. Because right now, it's just like lambs to the slaughter. That's what's happened. That's where we are. And then in long term, we can start looking at serious political opposition, anything at this point. I mean, anything at this point to try and do something about this. But I don't have any solutions, because like I've said, they hate her. They hate her, and they don't care if your girls are raped and burned alive in their homes. Because if they did, we would have known about this before today. The vast majority of those targeted were young white girls. But teenagers from the Asian community also fell victim. Well, I didn't really care. All right. But it blamed understanding and learning at that time and existing procedures. 2 separate investigations launched at the same time. It goes on and on. Victims 5 dead as abusers' tentacles leave trail of pain and tragedy. I mean, there's a much more to the article. I just wanted to have a bit of a rant about this, to be honest. It's a bit incoherent, and I needed to get it off my chest. A mum and 4 girls have died in tragedies linked to abuse. Lucy Lowe, 16, was killed in 2000 with her mum and sister after her 26-year-old abuser, Azhar Ali Mahmood, set fire to the house. A Pakistani in Britain has set fire to a house with a mother and the two sisters. He was raping one of the girls, abusing her, passing her on to his friends, and then he's burned them all down. He's burned them alive in the house and killed them. And did anybody know about this? I never knew about this. And I'm bombarded with this stuff every fucking day. I never heard of this. Why not? Did anybody else know about this? Did anybody else know that a Pakistani burned a house full of white women alive in this country? He was jailed. He was jailed. Where's the outrage? Where's the statues? Where's the new legislation being passed to keep these people away from white women? Nowhere. Fucking nowhere. Lucy's death was used as a warning to other. By who? Nobody knew about it. And yeah, so and when you speak out about it, you'll go to jail. They'll try and have you jailed for speaking out about this. And when I mean, the crazy thing. So we had Brittany Pettibone being detained in the airport yesterday, and she would have probably come in. I can imagine that these issues would have been the general discussion with Tommy Robinson and that kind of thing. And so the government detained her and won't let her out of the country and sent her back because she was going to come in and you know, she's got a bit of a following and this would have been an issue, I think. The general situation in Britain. And they've silenced her because they said that she was going to be stirring up here. And her boyfriend from Identity Europe, I think it is. I don't know much about these people, to be honest. But her boyfriend from Identity Europe, and they detained them both because they were going to stir up hatred against the Muslim population. And then, like, you know, and then, like, within 12 hours, this comes out. I mean, because it probably couldn't be. Well, how did it get published? They kind of keep it all in their wraps, I suppose. And so then this is pretty much what the Brittany Pettibone would have been talking about, and it's in a national newspaper. And you just have to think, how brain dead are the how smart are these people? Even from a sort of strategic perspective, the general discussion now isn't so much about the Muslims. They're just the mad dog. People are now looking at the British government itself. Why didn't they allow the Muslims to take the fall on this one with Brittany Pettibone? Why didn't they say, well, I'll tell you what, if we, because I mean, she's bloody beautiful. So why didn't they say, well, it looks ridiculous if we detain this big gorgeous young American girl coming in. We look like lunatics. So we let her in, and the Muslims can take the fall for it. You know, it'll be a bit damaging to community cohesion, but not that bad. Instead, they've locked her up, so they look like lunatics for that. And then within 12 hours, this article comes out, and the Muslims take the fall anyway. And you think, well, they just don't seem to care. They just don't care anymore because, and people will say, well, there's secret plots, or I mean, the idea that they don't care is a bit weird because the British government is not much more than a gigantic PR department with a few policies about the NHS and the railroads attached to it. So, I mean, they are bothered. They're obsessed with their PR. That's all the British government is, a PR department for a load of globalist policies. And yet, Yeah, I don't know. I think
If I can just jump in here as well, I mean, what's also happening is in the same way that you said the British government have become doing PR for the globalists. What's particularly sickening is that these kind of events turn your average kind of person, sort of liberal do-gooder who thinks that they're acting in with the approval of their own conscience. It turns them into PR sort of merchants for these crimes.
yeah,
It's a really sort of sick spectacle, isn't it? When you actually, I've seen it, firsthand. I've seen, but telling people about these things, you can see it on their face. You can see that when you start to bring this stuff up, the cogs in their head are turning, and without them even knowing why, they're sort of starting to formulate some sort of defense of the rapists, because of all this. They've just got this kind of dynamic, just completely solidified in their mind.
it's an inconvenience. It's like if it happens sometimes. Well, it happens here. What we've done a hangout about it, where when there's a mass shooting and everybody kind of holds their breath to see which side of the political spectrum the mass shooter is. Is he a lefty? Is he some sort of lefty anarchist? Or is he a white nationalist or like a Trump supporter? And everybody's like kind of, well, shit, and they wait for the news to come out, and it's something like that. But the Muslim grooming thing is this way, like an albatross around the neck of the liberal elite, and it doesn't go away. And I don't know, and it spreads as well. It's like this thing that they cannot clean themselves of it, and they act, well, we don't care, but that's not doing them any good at all. And I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do about this, because it is getting worse, and people are waking up about it. Because it's not. This is. It's weird because it's a really horrible sort of existential situation, but at the same time, it's low hanging fruit. It's not like the JQ or racial differences. It's something that everybody can understand very quickly. And I don't know what they're going to do about it in the long term. I want it to stop, but I don't. I don't know what to do. How to stop? I mean, I had a friend, a real life friend, and I was talking to him today for hours about it. And he's, we've got to just leave the country. It's fucked. And he's got a point, because what do you do when these kind of crimes happen? And the immigration doesn't. I mean, they're not even stopping. The 84% of these crimes are by one ethnic group. So they know that. That's well known. That was the Quilliam Foundation. And yet they're still shipping them in. They're still shipping them in.
Yeah, I also think it's really significant that if you to bring this up to people, a lot of people will, if you reverse the races of the attackers and the victims, which is like an obvious thing to do to get, it seems like such an obvious thing to do that it kind of rolls off the tongue when you're explaining these kind of arguments. But it says so much that to other English people, you have to put in their mind the victim as a non-white for them to actually start to care, and them to sort of like imagine the feeling of caring about it.
Yeah,
I mean, that in itself is kind of proving the point about people being completely detached and atomized.
I mean, I do think it speaks to white men in a sort of visceral level, in the gut, and I've spoke about this before, in more detail. I don't really want to go into it again, but there's biological reasons, like with me mate today. There's like he was saying that he was planning to go and see his mother. It's Mother's Day, so I'm going to go and see my mother and have a big dinner, and it'll be a bit of a pain in the arse, but it has to be done. That kind of thing. But the problem is, he said, I'm raging. Like my day's been destroyed because I cannot stop thinking about this business in Telford, and it's not normal. It's not like, say, you see an earthquake or even it's probably a terrorist attack, and it's because it's an attack on the manhood of white men. by other men. I mean, the girls are sort of, they're sort of collateral damage. It's a power struggle between men at the end of the day. I thought if I did this hangout tonight, it'll kind of let me vent me spleen a bit, and hopefully, I mean, I haven't checked the chat, but I mean, hopefully that the lads will know what I mean.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of quite. It's actually like quite traumatizing on, on the sort of like macro level. Like, I mean, I said something earlier on Twitter about that there used to be like an older England, like a much more innocent and this kind of stuff. Like when you in those kind of terms, it really is. It's just like it's the sort of loss of innocence, isn't it? The fact it's even happened in the country at all.
Yeah,
and
it is. I mean, I remember I was thinking about this before. There's a book he was a neocon, and I don't really like him very much. Where called Niall Ferguson, and he wrote a book called The War of the World. It was about 2010 or something. And it was actually a bit of a way he was a neocon, so it was a kind of critique of mass Muslim immigration, but then, with a couple of get out clauses about integration and stuff like that. But he looked back at the history of the early 20th century, and he was specifically in World War II. And I don't want to get into World War II and the JQ and everything like that. But the point that he made in the book was that ethnic warfare, when one ethnic group turns on another, it's different to when you're fighting about other issues. And he mentioned, again, I don't want to get into a whole who did what to who, but there was things going on in Eastern Europe and then in China with the Chinese, which were truly horrific. And I've been reading about this stuff for years, and there was things going on in Ukraine and Lithuania and Estonia where pregnant women were having their babies sliced out and then having live cats sewn into their bellies. According to this book, I couldn't believe it. There was like whole families being crucified on barns and people being skinned alive, and it was really brutal. And you think it's not like you're going out and fighting for a bit of land and then that's it. There's something happens, and these were people. He specifically chose these atrocities because they were people who'd been living together more or less in the same space for a long time, because the borders were always shifting left, right, and centre in Eastern Europe, especially after the First World War. And that kind of visceral hatred, that where the enemy doesn't have a certain specific set of ideological beliefs which have to be argued against. It's not like saying, well, individualism is better than collectivism, because when it comes down to it and you're living cheek by jowl with people, it ends up with literal extermination and the most horrific crimes imaginable. And it's a real black pill for liberals and liberalists, because that's actually the nature of man when it comes down to it. We in the West, we've been cushioned from it for a long time, and we're soft. But we will learn the hard way, by the looks of it. The nationalists was always really just a warning, because racially aware people understood this, and they said, it's not that we hate these people, it's that we don't want the bloodshed and the violence. We just want our own country to be left alone. We don't wish any hatred upon anybody else. It's just we've got an understanding of the way humanity is. That liberals and communists, well, you can be a bit cynical about them. Well, let's generally speaking, your conservatives and all of these other people, they just don't understand it. But it's not very pretty, and it manifests itself in Telford, in Rotherham, and everywhere else. I think you've got to be the winners or the losers at the end of the day. And I want us to be the winners. And at the moment, we're not winning. We're losing. But when you whittle it down, all of your, I mean, I got bored shitless with all of these debates on the internet where, you know, about individual freedoms and who's going to build the roads and who will build the roads in a libertarian society, who'll pay the hospital bills and all of this rubbish. It's just garbage. When it comes down to it, the mother and father of all true politics is blood. That's the way it works. So the rest, and to try and impose all of these highfalutin abstract principles, garbage, just garbage.
Like maybe you said to me before that a lot of people are completely obsessed over what's happening at point X, Y, Z, whilst most people are completely stuck at point A. And we need to, there's a huge sort of, well, as you were saying, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that can be discussed when the knife isn't at our throat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The knife is literally at our throat here. There's not. I remember Greg Johnson saying we have to fight like rats in a sack here. There's no time for all of this freedom of speech. That's another load of trash. This idea, these objectivists, where they believe in freedom of speech, is another. Freedom of speech is always dictated by who has power. At the moment, the people with power, primarily Jewish liberals, in the lefty cultural Marxist sense, globalists, and they're not. They'll put up with a bit of whinging, but at the end of the day, they'll clamp down and they'll shut you down if you're going to undermine their interests. And the idea that, again, it comes down to power. And that's why I'm not a free speech absolutist, because I want to have racially aware white men hold power in the Western world, not these people from nowhere. And the idea that I'm going to extend unlimited freedom of speech to some lefty twat like Owen Jones, out of why would I do that? Out of the goodness of me heart, because it sounds good, because it sounds humane. I wouldn't fight to the death for. Would anybody fight to the death for Owen Jones' freedom of speech? I wouldn't give Owen Jones a steam off me piss. Never mind fight to the fucking death for his lefty crap. So yeah, I mean, I just to wind it down, that I don't want to ramble on all night. I've got to get up for work. It's power at the end of the day. Or, I mean, I've got an article up there on the blog where Mel Gibson's Apocalypto about the rise and fall of civilizations, and you're either the hunter or the hunted. And like I said in that article, you can transcend the role of hunted and become the hunter. You can turn the tables. And we're going to have to do that somehow. How? I don't know. But it's going to have to be done. I think that's me pretty much done for this hangout.
All right. There's maybe one last thing I was going to mention, because I've got like a slight insider's point of view. Because I had a friend who did social work at university, and for they had an entire term of doing a diversity module, which is obviously like an entire term's worth of all of the, the kind of cultural Marxist stuff you've all come to expect. But they had a brief religion module as well, and they said that it was a really short one. It was only a couple of days, and for half the day it was spent with they had this guest imam come into the university and just talk about Islam essentially, and try and sort of trying to dispel the myths of Islam and offer these kind of counter arguments and stuff. And you can kind of see how it affects them psychologically, because there must be so many social workers who, for the entire rest of their careers, will just have that kind of moment in their mind. They'll just think, oh, but there was that time with the imam, or they'll say, but I met an imam and he told me this had nothing to do with Islam or any of these kind of things. So you can see how the psychological groundwork is kind of laying behind the scenes.
You can see that they ideologically prepare the left for certain. Let's just stick with Britain. It happens across the West, but if you just stick with Britain, you can see that they'll use something like the Independent, the New Statesman. The New Statesman's a bit higher brow, but then the Guardian, and they will sort of give them ideological weaponry. And a perfect example, just to get back to the grooming thing, would be the Jimmy Savile meme, where whenever a white British man gets angry about the Muslim grooming gangs, you can sort of ram Jimmy Savile in his face, and it's like that thing they put around the Hulk, where it's this foam just to contain you, just to sort of neutralize your argument. And then they'll go a little bit step further and say, "But you don't care." I've ranted about this on a hangout a week or two back, where they'll say, "Well, you don't care if it's white men raping these girls. You're just racist." And it's not. Because they're not racially aware, and they don't understand the true power dynamic, which isn't Marxist in that way. It's whose genetic line is dominating, whose genes are calling the running here, whose genes have the power. And in these situations, it's not the white genes. It's this sort of mixed soup mongoloid freak show that we've imported from Asia, which is this sort of non-identity, the identity of nothingness, which is the Pakistani. It's disgusting. They're like these orcs from Lord of the Rings, which were in Tolkien. They were like actually created from breeding goblins with elves, and I think there's a lot in that. And I think a certain ethnic group who are like evil incarnate, they love to see the degradation of the elves and the defilement of the pure and the beautiful, and they love to see that just destroyed.
Like I said, these people are morally different to us. They're not. I don't see them as just foreign. They're actually, they have a different set of morals.
Yeah, and I mean, and only white people would run around trying to make all these excuses to excuse them. Only white people do that. It's this kind of blindness that they can't see. They don't, they only white people are trying to only white people would try and look for an excuse to relativize the mass rape of white girls by non-white men. It's this sort of sickness. Will we get through it? I don't know. But right now, we are the hunted. We are the victim. And I know there's this kind of, everybody claims to be a victim these days. Well, yeah, when the entire fucking institution is against you, and then they've inverted that to make it out that you're the oppressor. It's not that what I want to see is us to be, and I don't want equality either. I want us to be the dominant power in our own country and across the West. It's not like I'm saying, oh, we should just kind of neutralize identity politics and all be fluffy bunny individuals running around. That's just garbage. You're either the hunted or the hunter. And I want us to be the hunter again. You know, like at the end of Apocalypto, when you see these Spanish men holding the cross, and they've got these this stern look on their face, and they're conquerors. They're full of vigor. And the world, the 500 years ago, the world was terrified of the white man, and the white man opened his heart to the world. And what did the world do? The world burned alive houses full of white women in the white man's own land. So enough. I've literally got nothing else to say on this subject. Enough.
Yeah. Okay. That's probably a good place to leave it then.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for listening to yet another Morgoth rant. Well, I had to get it off my chest. See you later.
Cheers.